The Witcher Blood Origins had its fair share of criticism, which is no surprise since this kind of backlash keeps happening to the franchise. Some of these criticisms are valid, but others might be a knee-jerk reaction. In this video, we'll discuss how the show isn't the failure people want it to be, and how it shows that the Witcher series isn't interested in winning back hardcore fans. First off, Blood Origins' connection to Sapkowski's notes. To understand and be interested in a story's prequel, we must first understand the story's ultimate ending, and the storytelling tradition that makes that ending make sense. Part of what makes Sapkowski's epic so interesting is how many different things it's based on. The novels are a mix of different ways of telling stories from around the world, including mythology and theology. Arthurian literature and Sapkowski's celebration and subversion of it is one of the saga's major foundational threads and its last note. The last part of Geralt, Yennefer, and Ciri's story is the only place where this tradition is brought up directly, even in the title. So it's not surprising that Dabara and Schmidt-Hystrich chose to bookend their prequel with a similar celebration and subversion of Arthurian ethos, mechanics, and archetypes. So why is this important? Does one need to know much about King Arthur to enjoy Blood Origin fully? Well, not even close. The fact that tradition is so common in culture and literature is one reason why it works so well and has such clear themes for many people. But the shared Arthurian elements here are worth looking into because they explain a lot about how quickly the risk-taking in Blood Origin is turned down or ignored. Up next, the goals of the show were clear from the start. There isn't one Arthurian book or series that tells us everything we need to know about the Knights of the Round Table. Instead, we'll find that the characters come to represent and what the story has continued to represent over the past 1600 years. The many versions, adaptations, and allusions of Arthurian stories over many centuries all talk about the idea of a strong and good person from the past coming back to save us and our future. From what? Well, the oppression of the present represents one thing: hope. Hope means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and that's important. Blood Origin's brilliance lies in how it shows and uniquely explains hope, followed by the prequel's shape is important. In Blood Origin, it's not a king, a warrior, or even a reluctant modern hero who saves humanity. And the legacy of our different knights and their shared quest isn't a person, a legendary table, or a holy grail, but the power of storytelling. So the people in power put a price on their heads and keep saying how dangerous it is for them to even exist. In the show, Baelor even says, that's a heroic folktale waiting to happen. Let's remember that Blood Origin isn't about a group of squabbling outsiders who unite against all odds to defeat an oppressive evil. It's about Sean Shai, who tells a long-forgotten story of a group of fighting outcasts who work together to defeat so that Jaskier can use the power of that story to give people hope. The technique of telling a story within a story is very important for several reasons. Even though some reviews pointed out that main characters and their relationships don't feel fully fleshed out, there's a reason for that. This is because they're not meant to be taken as wholly literal flesh and blood figures, but as archetypical, allegorical heroes whose deeds exist to serve a greater, more timeless purpose. Moving on to, the prequel had a disclaimer. The people in Sapkowski's stories often find out that what they think they know might not be true, and this is for a good reason. One of the show's most important themes, and the reason we get so many passages from world history books, is how truth can be changed. When Wood Dwarf doesn't like what a violent rebel group's doing, he says, maybe in a few years, I'll be called a traitor who betrayed my people, and they'll be the heroes. If anything, Blood Origin honors its source material's ability to keep us on our toes by forcing us to constantly question the continent's reality, and by extension, our own. It does this by adding to the known story of the first Witcher, which was told in Season of Storms, but it doesn't actually contradict that story. Also, you must recognize the fact that Blood Origin shows how to go back in time. Once time travel comes into play, you can't be sure how a prequel or origin story affects, changes, or goes against what happens later. Not to mention, Blood Origin wasn't all bad, but it had its problems. So far, we have a series that keeps, embraces, and repeats the way its source material celebrates a certain literary tradition. It also gives that tradition a new twist by giving us an Arthur, who isn't a once and future king, but a once and future story. And we have a group of characters who, like our Arthur's characters, both use and break parts of that well-known literary tradition, bringing it into the 21st century in a clear way. Here's where some of the complaints about the show are true. It needed 2 episodes leading up to a turning point, then a turning point, and then 2 episodes after the turning point that led to the end. As it is clear that there is some connection missing. Now, let's look at how Blood Origins doesn't care about winning back hardcore fans. Even more big changes were made to the original stories in the second season of Netflix's Witcher series than in the first. It changed how characters were seen, killed one of them, and added new ideas, like the idea that Ciri's blood could be used to make new Witchers. It threw out what was known about the Witcher world. To put it mildly, all that caused a stir. Everyone who loved the book series now shows up at every online discussion of the show to complain about how it butchered the books. Blood Origin didn't do anything to get these fans back. It also changed the continent's history, where Witchers come from, and the backstory of characters we met later in the saga. Not to mention, is the show that bad? Sure, it's received its fair share of mixed reviews, but that doesn't mean it's bad though. Blood Origin's a straight riff on 7th samurai, and any other story about a group of heroes coming together for a dangerous mission. In a scene where Jaskier the Bard hears the story for the first time, he sighs and says it's been done many times. Sage Baylor's a bad guy in the story. He thinks the 7 Warriors of Destiny are a threat because they sound like a legend waiting to happen. It's not very good either though. Characters who could have been interesting are pushed aside for 2 boring main characters who waste a lot of time with scenes. The elves seem like they could be more elf-like. Their culture, settlements, and beards are all the same as we've seen in the main series, which takes place over 1,000 years later. Even Lenny Henry can't make a bad guy whose only motivation's jealousy interesting, and the monsters don't look that good. So yeah, it's about average. 4 episodes of basic fantasy action with some swearing and flashes of Jaskier to remind you it's The Witcher, but nothing can be average on the internet, and especially not anything about The Witcher, which is in the middle of a fandom riot that makes it hard to talk about pop culture online. Let's learn more about how Henry Cavill's leaving the show had an impact and the lore problem. The end of Henry Cavill's time on the show has become a part of the show's legend. According to this myth, the noble ascended fan did his best to protect the holy canon of Andrzej Sapkowski's original text, but the evil Netflix writers beat him and drove him away. This version of what happened is based on many assumptions, like Cavill's comments about wanting to show a more book-accurate Geralt on the screen to tell the whole story. Blood Origin moves faster and less seriously than the main series regarding the lore. Before the human mages were credited in the books and games with making Witchers, the elves quickly devised a model of the Witcher making Trial of the Grasses. Series Blood's given a new origin, and the backstories of the plane-hopping elf Avalak and Eredin, the leader of the Wild Hunt, are changed. Coming up, Blood Origin's low rating and the consistency issue. Because of these flaws, Blood Origin has a 13% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. There was so much negativity and ranting about Blood Origin on Reddit that one subreddit had to split off another, more heavily moderated drama-free subreddit. It's silly to think that any work of fiction has a consistent canon that can never be changed without causing a revolution, but it's especially silly to think that The Witcher does. Sapkowski made up the early short stories as he went along, so there are many things about the setting and Geralt that need to be clarified. The last book, Season of Storms, has so many more contradictions that it seems like the author's trying to confuse readers who care about these things. Finally, how Dark Horse Publishing is catering to die-hard fans. In the meantime,
wiping out the monarchies and the clans.
Dark Horse Publishing has adapted for die-hard fans. Most of the versions of Geralt, Ciri, and the other characters in the Witcher comics made with CD Projekt looked like they did in the games. But in 2022, Dark Horse published a version of The Grain of Truth that was much more true to the books. It was based on an early Witcher short story that was a lot like The Beauty and the Beast. Geralt even has the leather headband that Sapkowski says he wears, at least until Yennefer calls it pretentious and makes him take it off. But is it any good? It doesn't add much to the story if you've already read it, and it's not as fun as other Witcher comics like Curse of Crows. And on that note, that's a wrap for this video. Do you think that Blood Origin is exactly the kind of failure people are projecting it to be? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.